My name is Eric Espinoza. I am a structural engineer. Today, wanted to talk a little bit about Fluor, what we do as a company, who we are, and then, give a little bit of background as far as, where this company has been. Talk a little bit about, structural engineering as a whole and what we do within the structural engineering field with Fluor. And then, identify a little bit about, I was asked in terms of internship opportunities. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then offer up a little bit of career advice since I know, I remember it's kind of weird. I graduated back in '99 from undergrad. And I can't believe it's been that long, but I still remember, the feeling as you're, about to finish up school or you're still, going through your undergrad, the many questions that would come up. And so, I identified a couple things that I, thought would be good to discuss. And then I'll share a little bit about my personal experience as far as the work and then answer any questions. So hopefully, I'm very visual, so I like pictures. So if, as far as me being a good speaker, I don't know. I've never listened to myself. So if I tend to bore you guys, at least you guys get some good pictures to kind of look at and, maybe think of some questions to ask me. Don't be embarrassed to ask me questions. There's no silly questions in my mind. I think the more you know, or the more, you can get information, I think the better, it prepares you in the long term. So me, I'm an open book, happy to answer any questions. So I guess really quickly, I will, give an introduction just so you know where I come from, where, I've been. I currently manage the what we call the CSA department in Southern California for Fluor. CSA standing for Civil, Structural, and Architectural Engineering. We're sitting at about almost 60 people, just depends on whether I hire a couple people here in the next couple of weeks, but we're about 60 people in the department in Southern California. And we have actually two offices. We have Aliso Viejo, which is the main office in South Orange County. And then we have the other one, as mentioned by Jazz, up in Long Beach, which is just an extension of our Aliso Viejo operation. As far as me, I did my undergrad at UC Irvine and then ended up doing my graduate work at Cal Poly Pomona, just to try to, balance out the theoretical with the practical. So that's the reason why I picked both schools. And with Fluor, I actually started when I was a junior in 1997 as an intern. I was granted a scholarship for engineering and construction. And with that, they offered up an internship, which is actually pretty good because I was a big nervous wreck back then. So I probably, if I would have had the interview, I probably would have failed horribly. And, I would have been working, maybe at McDonald's or something. And then as far as interests, I splattered a lot of images here in terms of, the things that I find interesting. Primarily right now, cycling, since, we're all kind of stuck at home for the most part. Cycling has been, really good to get out and, ride around the city and kind of stay away from people. When I get a chance, I love pizza. So if you want to talk pizza, definitely let me know. My favorite is over in downtown Fullerton, Fuoco, if you guys haven't been able to get down there. Fantastic pizza. And then playing soccer. I even threw a picture of myself. I do a lot of, or I used to do a lot more, but folkloric dancing. I'm Mexican, so I used to be in a group, Mexican folklore dancing. I'm married to a Colombian lady, and she got me into Colombian folk dancing. So, and then when that's not happening, I'm either with my family or traveling around. I love traveling. So again, a little bit of background on me, on who I am. So with regards to the company, Fluor is, one of the world's largest publicly traded engineering, procurement, construction, and maintenance companies. We have clients all around the world. We provide Primarily, which is what we're interested in here, is the engineering side of things. Again, when I was in school, I had no idea what procurement was. Procurement is the purchasing of all the items required to build a facility. So it could be anything from bulk materials, in our case, structural steel, anchor bolts. It could be pipe hangers, and then for the other disciplines, obviously pipe, cable, equipment, all that stuff. We do all that purchasing in house. With regards to construction, we do a lot of construction management. We have a group of self-performing construction services individuals, which we obviously bring on a lot of folks, for the crafts, but primarily it's the construction management that we offer. And with fabrication, we have a couple of mod yards. The picture there, if you could see it, you see this big cage-looking thing. It's the framing for a module. And so when we're talking about fabrication, we don't actually do the steel fabrication itself. But what we do, one approach that we've taken with regards to building the facilities that we build, and you guys will see in a little bit what I mean, is doing it via what we call modules. So the comparison that I like to give is the purchasing of when you guys go out and buy furniture, you guys have two options. One, you can go to any of the big furniture companies, Living Spaces, or any of those kinds of stores, and you can buy a sofa, you could buy a bookshelf, you could buy a table, and it's already pre-built. And you take that home and you just put it wherever you're going to put it, and there you go. That's a module. Versus what is traditionally done in construction for what what we're involved in, which is the structural steel foundations. It's a stick-built approach. And so if any of you have ever visited IKEA, you guys walk around this big giant store and you pick out, you write down the numbers associated with the items that you want to purchase. And then you go downstairs and look in a big giant warehouse for that item. And you walk home with, or you don't walk home, you drive home with a big box of pieces that you now have to go home and build inside of your house, right, before you put it in place. And so that is a stick-built approach. And so when we're talking about fabrication, we're talking about getting fabricated steel, fabricated pipe, fabricated cable, and pieces of equipment. We send that to a fabrication yard that we own, and we build that. We put it all together like you guys do, a bookshelf that you buy at IKEA, and then we ship that built to a job site. So that's what we mean by fabrication. We do not own a fabrication for steel yard. So with regards to the company, so obviously as an engineering company, as a construction company, we take pride in the culture that we have in the company. The four, and that's one thing, right? Fluor is notorious for having 1,000 acronyms that you have to learn early on. So when you start working at Fluor, you're pretty much lost in every conversation and every meeting that you go to because there's so many acronyms. But here, with regards to the site, it identifies, 4 of the key core values that we look at with regards to the culture that we have in the company. Safety is a big deal. Obviously, being in construction sites or being in the office, safety culture is very important to us because I think, somebody put it very well that, we want people to show up to work and leave work all, in the same amount of health and in the same condition that you show up. So definitely, safety is an integral part of what we do and how we do our work, which, is kind of demonstrated in the designs that we do. Integrity, obviously, you guys have seen over the years, if you pay attention to, the Wall Street Journal or any news articles, you'll see that there's always issues with regards to ethics company ethics, companies doing shady business. A good example, we had a huge contract that we were chasing down in Brazil to build a new industrial facility. Project was worth somewhere around $15 billion to build that facility. But if you know anything about Brazil, there was a lot of corruption going on with the company that was to be our client. And so we backed out of that competition, mainly from an ethical standpoint. Teamwork, if there's one word that, I really value as a department manager, is collaboration, building an environment that really looks at individuals for what they could bring to the table, recognizing that we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and finding a way to really leverage people's strengths and things that they know how to do well, and together overcoming the shortcomings that we all have. And then obviously excellence, taking pride in our work, which hopefully, a group like I forgot how you pronounce the group's name, SEACPP. Obviously, hopefully, being part of this group, exposes you to the importance of our profession as structural engineers. We as structural engineers obviously have to take into account the fact that our work really impacts the general public. And so, having excellence is not an option. Having excellence in how we execute our work, how we do our work, it has to be an integral part of what we do. And so obviously at Fluor, we really value that, and we make that, one of the things that we chase after from year to year with regards to employees' goals. So what else did I put in here? As far as the size of the company, just so you could get an image of the magnitude of how big Fluor has grown over the years. We've been in business for more than 100 years. We have offices in more than 34 countries, from what I understand. We have 45,000 employees worldwide. And over the years, as the company has grown, it started here in the US. We started here in the city of industry. And then over the years, we kept expanding. We opened up an office in Houston, opened up an office in Calgary, merged with other companies. And then we were over in Irvine off of the 405. When people think of Fluor, they always think of that facility. So if you ever talk to any of your professors and you mention Fluor, they'll remember the office in Irvine. And I think that office was very futuristic at the time. It comes out in a lot of movies. I think there's a Sylvester Stallone movie that was filmed there. Judge Dredd, I think, is the one. But anyway, and so you can see, over the years, the company has grown tremendously. We used to be all domestic, but then, as the reality that is globalization, took hold even of our industry, we expanded to have more access to our clients. And so offices, just opened up. We acquired other companies. Again, just like any growing company, nothing out of the ordinary. And then just as a company itself, just to highlight, to show off a little bit, I guess, some of the awards and recognition that have been granted to Fluor as a company. And over the course of the years, even when I was in school, even before I started the internship, I always noticed Fluor, was always recognized by Engineering News Record, and other publications that would, focus on ranking different companies. Fluor, I always remember, over the course of my studies, was always ranked pretty highly, if not, top ranked. So good company to work for. As I mentioned, here locally in Southern California, we have the two offices, Aliso Viejo being the main office, and then extending out to Long Beach to service the client base that we have locally, which is primarily, the refinery, industry. And so, hence the reason why we have an office in Long Beach. If you drive up the 405 through Long Beach, you'll see, a slew of refineries there in Carson, Wilmington, in Torrance. There's another one in Paramount. There's one in El Segundo. A lot of facilities here locally, up in the Bay Area, up the West Coast. There's a lot of refinery complexes. And so here locally, we have about 600, it tends to fluctuate, 600, 700 people in Southern California. And here locally, we're primarily focused on the engineering, procurement, and primarily project management with a little bit of construction management kind of thrown in to make things exciting. From a focus area, the industries that we serve, our bread and butter is, the oil and gas or energy and chemicals. It has different, names depending on what you look at in, if you look in the business portion of newspapers, or, if you look on LinkedIn, oil and gas, energy and chemicals. And so we're looking at, again, refineries, gas processing, chemical plants, power generation, but we also dive into, a bit of infrastructure and a bit of life sciences as we try to help out some of the other offices. So definitely, we do a slew of things, but primarily heavy industrial type facilities. And so just to kind of give an image of what that means, again, whether you pay attention to or not as you're driving up the 405, you'll see, a slew of these big industrial complexes at night. As you're driving through Long Beach, as you look over, you'll see this big, glowing, thing with a bunch of steam coming out of certain parts of the facility. And you'll wonder, man, I wonder what that thing does. Maybe some folks are not familiar with, refineries. And so, what we provide is, again, the engineering, all-encompassing engineering of these facilities. And so, from a civil engineering standpoint, maybe there's some folks that are still wondering whether it's structural engineering, because obviously, as you're taking concrete, as you're taking timber, as you're taking, steel design, it becomes very attractive to be able to finally produce something with your knowledge set. But even from a civil standpoint, you could see as, one of these facilities, much like you would a city, you need to be able to provide the infrastructure, to protect it from, stormwater, trying to keep the water from flooding the facility, providing roads, providing, rail design. If you have a rail loading type facility, these are all facilities that need to be designed within the civil function. And obviously the structures, as you look around to the picture, you see a lot of big structures, which maybe, you fail to capture the scale of these things. But here in the front, you could see a couple buildings, big warehouse buildings that kind of set the scale for that entire facility. And so, from a civil standpoint, from a structural standpoint, from an architectural standpoint, you could see that, we have a lot of involvement, but primarily structural is, the bigger part of our group. From a civil standpoint, what would be comparable to a traditional civil firm, you have a civil firm that looks at, where you have broken down groups, where you have the roadway group, you have the transportation group, you have the water resource group. In our facilities, our civil group looks at all of that typical civil infrastructure. And then the structural group will look at all the structures and foundations for the different facilities. From a engineering standpoint, we're a little bit different than your traditional structural firms or your traditional civil firms, in that we have all the disciplines in-house necessary to design these facilities. So here's a list of all the different engineering disciplines that we have in-house. We have a lot of, from the majors that you have in the engineering school at Cal Poly, it would be, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and civil engineers. And then they all, depending on their specialization, they all fall in within some of these different disciplines. I will mention that our group in red, our process is really the money maker for our company. as clients are looking to develop a technology, the technology is really related to the chemistry of things. And so, they're looking at maybe developing a new plastic, or, maybe, something that we're seeing right now, which is kind of a buzzword in the industry, is as we have interest in trying to save our, environment, our planet, there's a big focus on this, buzzword called the energy transition, right? Going from what has been, energy that we use in our daily life, whether it's our cars, our homes, anything that requires power to run, we've traditionally gotten that power from fossil fuels. And so, one of the things that we're seeing right now, as we have interest and we push to protect the environment, we're seeing a transition into all sorts of, non-fossil fuel based energy sources. And so, one of the things that we're seeing, as I mentioned, is, our process group is very, very important for pushing, those ideas with clients. And so, again, we're our civil group, which is civil, structural, architectural. We're kind of a necessary evil. We're a support discipline within this mechanism that is Fluor, where the moneymaker, again, is the process engineering. So from a structural engineering standpoint, as we look at the discipline that is of interest to the group here, when we're looking at structural engineering, we provide the, the everyday structural engineering exercise for all sorts of, big industrial structures. So here in the picture, I have some, over top left, what looks like a roller coaster is actually a series of structures that support some major conveyors for a mining facility. We primarily focus on structural steel and concrete. So I have some pictures there of, some concrete foundations, some big heavy duty concrete structures that are under construction. In the bottom left, I mentioned modules. So again, looking at, the living spaces approach to where you go and buy a already built item. There we are installing a already built facility where we just pick it up and drop it into place. And then over on the right-hand side, you could see, some pretty big building-like structures that are left open. So in these industrial facilities, the structures that we design are very similar to buildings. They have, similar framing, moment frames, brace frames, but they're left unopened. Not a lot of, concrete floors as diaphragms, no walls, no windows, nothing like that. And so from a serviceability standpoint, we tend to design to, kind of a more specialized set of criteria than you would a building. And so those are some of the challenges that we face. But again, when it comes to, structural engineering, structural engineers determine the criteria, the materials. We're looking at, the design of the, the gravity system, the lateral force resisting system, whether we're in a wind controlled region. Again, recognizing that our clients are global. In some cases, seismic is not the governing condition that we're looking after. And then even, as mentioned over here with regards to the module, we may be in a wind control region, we may be in a seismic controlled region, but what actually may end up governing the design may be the different transportation conditions that we have. If we're fabricating and putting together this stuff overseas, somewhere in China, somewhere in Korea, and we're barging these modules over, the Pacific Ocean, you could imagine the kinds of loads that structure is going to feel as it's being transported over the, entire length of the Pacific Ocean. And so those are the kinds of things that we are designing for. And then from a, kind of the thing that's showing up more and more right now, which is actually applicable to other industries as well, whether it's, if you go into designing bridges, for example, or you do this kind of stuff. There's a lot of existing infrastructure right now that we're trying to make use of and expand upon. And so as you look at, the 405 expansion, right? You don't completely tear down the 405 and build a whole new 405. You're actually expanding, some of those facilities, whether they're bridges, whether they're, existing drainage structures. You're expanding those structures. And so, much the same in our industry, we're looking to take a lot of these existing facilities, again, in recognition of what I mentioned with regards to the energy transition. We're looking to repurpose a lot of these facilities that have been, historically just, petroleum refinement facilities. And so, for example, we have a project here in Paramount, in the city of Paramount, if you guys are familiar. There's a refinery that's been, in existence for the last, 70, 80 years. I don't know how long it's been there, but they're converting that into a biodiesel facility. So again, looking at a renewable type facility, taking an existing facility and upgrading it to something else. And so for us, what that means is the focus has now, when we were, as I mentioned, historically a secondary discipline, a support discipline, we're now kind of up front and center, because now a lot of the ideas that are being thrown out by some of the chemical engineers or some of the some of the process folks as they're trying to come up with an idea to repurpose a facility, we're the ones that are now dictating where some of this existing infrastructure could actually support what they're trying to do, given that, again, these facilities have been around for 80 years. Maybe they don't work. And so we're seeing a lot of work that we're doing now involves a lot of seismic upgrades, additions to existing structures, retrofit, that kind of stuff, in, a lot of times in live units, which makes it a little bit more complicated in terms of construction. And so, again, constructability becomes very important. And so, I'll mention a little bit about career development long-term here in a little bit in a separate slide. And so from a, down to the weeds in terms of what we do, here I put some images of a depiction of what we do as a discipline. And so over on the left, you could see the analysis model for what is one of the most complicated structures that we see in a refinery, which is a coke structure. You could see the analysis model contains a finite element model of the foundation. It includes, the structural steel. It also includes, some of the equipment that's actually sitting on the structure itself, because in terms of dynamic response, those vessels are very, very heavy. They're filled with semi-liquid substance that tends to vibrate as they drill through some of that material. They heat it up. So these things are like giant boiling pots that are cooking some material inside. And those towers, what they are is they're drills that drop in and out of these drums to kind of break up that material as it's getting cooked. And so in terms of loading, we need to develop these analysis models to be able to evaluate, again, gravity loads, earthquake loads, wind loads, but these very specialized conditions as well that we need to look at that happen during operation. Once we finish our engineering and our analysis, we provide information to the other part of our group, which are the designers. Maybe in a traditional structural firm, they refer to them as draftsmen. In our case, they tend to be kind of draftsmen and women on steroids. They have a lot of knowledge. A lot of these folks have a lot of construction experience. They have a lot of fabrication experience. And so they bring with them a lot of knowledge in terms of how to put these structures together. And so in the middle, is that part of the work that involves creating a 3D model, a visual model of what we're intending in our design with regards to the engineering. And with the use of that model, they could extract two-dimensional drawings, which is what we need to develop to provide to either our plan checkers, our fabricators, or construction for them to build off of. And then over on the right, you could see the ongoing construction of what is the bottom portion of that structure. And you could see some folks there, so you could see relative magnitude in terms of size, of how big that structure is. And so also within construction, the other part of what we do is, nothing goes perfectly in construction. There's always things that come up, things that, were unforeseen, members that are out of plumb, connections that can't be put together, that can't physically be, erected, foundations that were poured in the wrong place. I mean, there's all sorts of craziness that happens during, construction. And so we need to provide construction support to be able to provide resolution to the ongoing work that's taking place. With regards to the industry, and again, this is just something that's happening across the board, whether you go work at Boeing in their finite element analysis group, or you go work for NASA to come up with the structural framing for a satellite. There's a couple things that are happening that I think are important, for you guys to consider. One is that there is a baby boomer generation right now that is retiring, that is taking with them a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge that may or may not, depending on the company, have been transmitted to some of our younger generations. These other two, number two, energy transition, I talked about already, the interest that the world has in getting away from its dependence on fossil fuels for powering whatever it is that we have in our lifestyles. And then globalization and connectivity. The reality is here. We're in a global economy. Our connectivity is such that we could communicate as we are doing here. I'm not at Cal Poly with you guys. I'm at home, and most of you are at home as well. These are things that are transforming, the work environment. They're transforming the way our companies function. Plus, any experience or knowledge in terms of career advice that you might be getting from some of your, if you have internships and you're, working with some folks that have been around for 35, 40 years, some of the, advice that you might get in terms of, how to develop over the years may no longer apply. Not necessarily that it's bad advice, but it's also taking into account the reality that what you guys are going to be facing in the workplace is going to be way different than, what I faced when I first started, 23 years ago, right? And so I think these are important things to consider as you look at developing your career in terms of, okay, there's this generation of people that as I see them retire, I really need to spend as much time as I can learning from them, because they have just so much experience, so much knowledge that when you start working, I highly encourage you to get out and interface with these folks. And then as far as energy transition, I think I've mentioned it quite a bit. We're seeing a big impact coming to, to a lot of industries based on our interest in really cleaning up the environment. And then again, globalization. I think I have some slides in here regarding, things to avoid. One of them, I hope that this is not something that, is prevalent in the group. I doubt it is. I think, you guys look, pretty cool. Entitlement, I think, is one of the biggest tripping hazards that a lot of us face as we come out of school, thinking that we deserve a job, that, we've been working hard, and thus, I deserve, a high paying job, with a lot of good benefits. Yeah, you have to take notice that, with globalization, the competition is now, on a global standpoint. And so, I think these are things that, again, as you're looking to develop and as you're looking to find a place to work at, definitely having folks that you could bounce these ideas off of and talk about these kinds of things are very important. And so before I get into some of the, career advice or, internship, specifics, just a little timeline in terms of what I've done over the course of the years. I will say that, as an intern at Fluor for 2 summers, I was offered a job, coming out of school. And so I never bothered to look for a job elsewhere because I really liked working at Fluor. And so about a month before I graduated, I reached out to ask when I was going to start. And, wouldn't you know it, that there was actually a downturn in workload. And so I think I broke a world record by being maybe the only person in history to ever be laid off before actually, starting to work permanently for a company. I think I may be, one of the few in the history of the world to have ever been laid off from a company before starting. But nevertheless, I ended up, jumping to another company, RBF Consulting, which is no longer around as a company. They ended up getting swallowed up by Baker International, which now goes by Michael Baker. You guys have probably heard the name. I ended up working there for a little bit. So I ended up working on infrastructure projects, land development projects in the structural group. But it didn't last long before I returned to Fluor. And so, from there, I worked on, getting my license. I ended up traveling quite a bit with the company. And so I had some assignments in Houston, Mexico City, up in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. I ended up, taking my SE exams. I ended up passing that in 2007. As I went through my career in structural engineering, I noticed a lot of holes in my understanding of what we do. I could do it, but there was a lot of lingering questions as to why we did certain things. And so I figured, I want to go back and do a master's for the sake of understanding what it is that I'm doing, more than just being able to run numbers. When I finished my master's, I ended up doing another assignment up in Detroit. When I finished that assignment, I ended up in Vancouver, up in Canada. And then, when I came back from that, I ended up, getting out of structural engineering for a little bit and actually stepping up, overseeing the engineering as a whole, but not myself. I was actually working for a very experienced engineering manager who actually helped me understand how we execute these big, ginormous projects. Because again, up until that point, I had a large focus on structural engineering alone. And then I became a lead structural engineer in 2013, and then took this role as the manager of the department back in 2018. So just a little bit of background in terms of how my career has developed, and some of the different things that I've done to gain experience, to kind of step out of my comfort zone, which was required every time I left, on these 2-year assignments to some far off land that I was not familiar with, where I knew nobody. I know there's a prevalent idea that, traveling for work is always awesome. It's exciting, and it is. But, there's always the counterbalance of that there's challenges involved with traveling, in that, you kind of lose contact with your friends. You don't participate a lot in, family events, or, as your friends and family, have kids or get married, or not in that order. But you definitely miss out on a lot of that stuff. But, obviously it comes with also the benefit from a career standpoint. So, and just to break up the monotony a little bit, one thing I've noticed in LinkedIn, as I kind of pop my head in, I keep noticing that there's a lot of job postings for new hires, where they're looking for a fresh out of school new grad with 5 years of experience, which makes absolutely no sense. But then I get to reading, obviously, in interviewing folks, I get to reading, folks' resumes, and I see that, they're a junior in college, and, they're they have 5 years of experience. And so I think it kind of goes hand in hand for whatever reason. But just wanted to break up the monotony a little bit in terms of what we see in the industry. And so as far as internships, I know back when I started, the internship program was a lot more formal and more strict in terms of it being just summer internships that were available. Over the course of the years, and especially now, right now, I have a couple interns working with us, and they're both, at school, working remotely. We give them a laptop. And so they've been working with us remotely, just again, like all of us are already doing anyway. But as far as what we're looking for with regards to interns, we're looking primarily at 3rd and 4th year students, mainly because, again, from a technical standpoint, the structural engineering tends to be, very, just very techy, requires a lot of advanced knowledge of topics that you haven't learned in your first 2 years. It's a lot more technical than, say, like if you went into land development, for example, where you could get away with learning how to use, AutoCAD and Excel and Word. Here, we run a lot of calculations, a lot of analysis, and because we're on the West Coast, there's a lot of earthquake engineering related activities that we need to look at. And so, again, the knowledge for that just does require a little bit more than, your first 2 years. But, again, it's not to say that that's, an absolute guarantee. As long as, you have your basic computer skills, you have mobility, more than anything, you enjoy working with people, you want to learn, you have the ability to communicate, and you've done well in your classes. I think that's important. And you're shapeable. I think that's, for me, that's probably the most important thing, is how shapeable are you? How, because realistically speaking, I know there's, this idea that, with a couple internships and what you've learned in the undergrad, you guys are going to come out flying, out of school. But realistically, it's going to take a company investing in you for, good 2-3 years and helping you get up to speed to learn what it is that you need on the job. Structural engineering is not easy. There's a lot of stuff that you just can't learn in an undergrad program. There's a lot of stuff that you can't learn even in a master's program. And so it's really going to take a company investing in you and bringing you on to learn all these things. And so I think the most important quality that I see, outside of, you take an interest in your craft by doing well in your classes, is, how well you get along with people and how shapeable you are. And so, for career paths with Fluor, there's a lot of different things that you could do. Here it's broken down into, 3, main topics. One, are subject matter experts. So these are the folks that are really, really hardcore structural engineers. And again, even as subject matter experts, one of which is, your instructor for structural steel, Mr. Rick Drake. He's one of our subject matter experts. Even within that, Rick is our subject matter expert for structural steel. He is not our concrete expert. He is not our expert on, geotechnical engineering, anything like that. He's our expert for seismic. He's our expert for structural steel. Even within, the structural engineering branch, there's a lot of things that you could specialize in. And so it's not just, kind of one or the other. There's a lot of stuff that you can specialize in within structural engineering. Obviously, as you start to discover your own capabilities, as you start to discover your own interests and the things that you are good at, you might recognize that, crunching numbers all day may not be, the thing for you. You might recognize that you have the ability to lead a group. You have the ability to manage a group and, inspire other individuals. And so there's definitely opportunities in management, whether it's project management, engineering management, the discipline management. There's obviously career paths that could take you down that route. Some folks like being in construction sites. And so, obviously another opportunity is to be, within the construction discipline. And then, we have some folks that have made a career out of being on assignment, either international or domestic. I did that for close to, 9 years of my life, going on assignment, being away from home, working on projects, being at job sites, or being, in international offices. There's definitely opportunities there as well. All right. So now we'll get into a little bit of career advice. And so mind you, if anybody, this is one of those things that, you kind of hope people recognize. When somebody's giving you advice, more often than not, it's stemming from a regret that they have of their own personal life. And so whenever somebody's giving you advice, just show, common courtesy and hear them out. You might learn something from them. Doesn't hurt you to listen to what they have to say. But again, that's just something that you'll see over the course of the years. When you start giving people advice, you're going to be giving them advice of things that you wish you would have done or wish you hadn't have done. And so one thing, that I think as you look at job postings, as you look at what companies are looking for in their employees, you're going to see, communication mentioned, great communication skills. And so, I think more often than not, we equate communication with the ability to speak. But I think, you guys have probably already heard, that, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so we should be able to listen more than we speak, mainly because, I know, sometimes even the articles that you looked at that you look at in LinkedIn, giving advice on interviews and such, sometimes they twist, some, or give you some canned advice on, being able to talk and, being really talkative in an interview. But really, communication is the ability, more than just talking, is the ability to listen. It's the ability to be receptive to, a message that somebody's trying to convey to you. And then also with you, how well do you communicate this ability to talk? Are you able to provide a very concise message, maybe with a picture, with some graphs? There's a lot to communication, I think, in terms of, writing capability, your ability to write an email without coming off as, frustrated or angry, or, somebody misunderstanding your message. There's a lot to communication, I think, that you guys will learn on the job. But definitely, pay attention and listen to what your coworkers who have been around a while have to say, because they could share a lot about, how to interface with clients, how to interface with other disciplines, how to interface with some of your coworkers. You're going to have a grumpy guy, on your team, asking others how they dealt with that grumpy guy that screams at everybody. Probably more, it's more helpful than you, trial by error, learning, how to deal with that person. Next, I indicated leadership is, not demonstrated by you being bossy. Same thing. I think much like communication, leadership, whether we watch it in, on sitcoms or movies, leadership is sometimes, very misunderstood into meaning that, the bossier you are, the person that likes to boss everybody around and tell everybody what to do, that's the leader right there. And to be honest, that's not true. That's not true. There's a lot about leadership that I think you're going to discover, through the course of your career, that little by little, you're going to start to recognize, like, holy cow, that idea that I had from movies, from watching Wall Street, the super greedy guy, or, any of these movies, you're going to start to see that idea is going to fade away. And it's really about your influence over individuals. How much can you influence people to do things that are sometimes painful, that maybe sometimes they don't want to do? And that's not just, the people that work with you, that's clients, that's, maybe a community leader that, is, blocking the way for your project. How can you demonstrate leadership to work with them to accept an idea that maybe is not something that they want to do? So again, leadership is, I think, something that's going to take some time for you guys to, construct in your mind in terms of the definition. Your ability to collaborate. I think I mentioned, one of the key things that I see in my group is that we create an environment that's very collaborative. This competition between, I'm smarter than you, or, I got better grades than you, or anything like that. To be honest, I try to steer everybody away from those kinds of conversations because, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot that we each one of us brings to a group, whether it's, a comforting personality, whether it's the ability to speak in front of a large group, whether it's the ability to think through details that maybe not everybody sees. We all bring different skill sets that, even though all of you will graduate with a bachelor's degree, there's certain qualities about you that are different from one another. And so definitely learning to pick up on that and using that as a launching pad to collaborate with others and exercise other strengths, I think is very important as you get into the workplace. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times. Yep.
It's 1 o'clock, so I have to yeah, it's okay. Yeah, we really enjoyed it so far. But I have to kind of officially end this meeting. So if anyone has class and anyone wants to go, feel free to leave. We will still stay on for maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. I personally have to leave, but yeah, I guess we'll just open it up this time for questions and answers. Is that okay with you, Eric?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, this was the last slide anyway, so.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, I'm gonna head out. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. My instructors told me that every time that you go to another state, they are supposed to take the PE exam. I guess in your case, it was the SC exam as well. Do you have to take those when you were in other states?
No. So being in California, you guys are going to sit for the California specific PE exam to get licensed in California. California tends to be one of the tougher exams that you take. It's one of the tougher licenses to get in the US. And so getting a license in California opens up the ability to get reciprocity from other states. There is a website that has a system, and I forget the name. I think it's NCES or NCIS, something like that, where you could sign up and create a profile. And so as you get projects in other states, you pay, $70 or $80, and, they take your PE from California. Once you get it, you submit some papers, and, you could get a license in another state without having to take a test. The only other state that has a very specific requirement to get their license, which would mean simply looking at that component of the exam, is Alaska, because they have a cold weather portion of the exam that you have to pass in order to be licensed in Alaska. So, but with the California PE, you could get reciprocity across the majority of the states, other than Alaska. Alaska, you'd have to take that last component for cold weather.
Thank you. And the other one, when you were talking about softwares, what softwares normally you guys were looking besides the office ones? Like, I don't know, like SAP or ETABS or something like that?
No, we primarily, have you guys heard of RISA 3D? RISA is a software that was actually developed in Fluor by an engineer, and then Fluor had no interest in developing that software any further. This is a long time ago, I think late 70s. And so that individual ended up spinning off and creating his own company, which is the RISA company. And so that's the software that we use. It's probably the most user-friendly of all the different structural analysis programs between SAP and STAT and all those, RISA, because again, it was created by a structural engineer. In some cases where we do some advanced analysis, maybe for foundations for vibrating equipment, or some advanced pushover analysis for existing structures, we do use SAP, but again, SAP is not user friendly at all. So we try to stick to using RISA, which pretty much covers, I think, 95% of anything that we do. So.
Hi, I have a question. Well, first of all, thank you so much. It has been a great presentation. I really appreciate the information you are sharing with us. But throughout the presentation, you mentioned transitioning to renewable resources. And I was curious, from your experience, what are some of those alternative resources that you have seen being?
So for example, right now we are working, I mentioned the project that we have here in the city in an existing refinery. We're converting that into a biodiesel facility. And what the product's going to be, obviously diesel fuel for jets, but what they call it, what we're going to be using is consumed cooking oil from restaurants. And so we're no longer going out and getting, raw petroleum from the Middle East or Canada or, from the Gulf. We're using a lot of cooked, oil, pretty much anywhere that's collected, and using that as, kind of what's being put into the facility. In other cases, our process group is working on a technology to capture CO2. And so some of the work that we're seeing is, these existing facilities installing a CO2 capture component to their facility to reduce emissions. In some cases, there are some companies that are looking at, and it's some weird technology, but they're looking at injecting water into the ground, deep into the ground, and storing it under pressure. And then as it's released, through steam, it powers, some power generators or some turbines that then, feeds power into the grid. Some other ones that I'm trying to think of. So there's some that we're looking at right now, traditional, gasification plants, which is really just, taking some sort of, some item, burning it, and then as it burns, it releases, heat, and that powers a turbine. What we're seeing right now is we're trying to recycle, wood products, from various sources to power some power plants up in Northern California. So again, it's a transition from the fossil fuels, oil, coal, these big pollutants, and trying to convert it into, some other type of facility that puts energy into the system, which, and so for example, that power plant that I mentioned where they're using the wood chips, they're going to be, trying to get that into the grid. But then specifically, there's companies that are interested in that power so that they could get some credits from the, environmental agencies to get, kickbacks in terms of monetary, benefits from the government. So some examples.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank Eric for coming to SEACPP today to speak to our club about Fluor. I thought it was really interesting, and I loved how how you gave your personal career advice to us. So I'm going to end the meeting, but if anyone else has question, our secretary Yasmin is going to send out a follow-up email. And if you guys have any questions, just make sure to email us and we'll send you guys, or we'll forward the questions to Eric. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Sure.
Have a good day, everyone.
Take care, everyone.